I was in San Diego. This was probably a few weeks ago, and I couldn't believe it. I ran across the street, just wanted to grab a taco for lunch. That's it. Just nice little place, grabbed my taco, came back over across the street, and a woman pulls out a crack pipe, like right in front of me. There's a cop right behind me. And she pulls out her crack pipe. She lights it right in my face, and she just starts smoking crack. What's killing America? I don't think you could have a better headline or a better title for a book than that, because I think so many of us are watching what we love start to fade away, or we feel like it's intangible, like we can't touch it anymore. Like the America that we knew, the one that we loved and fought for, and we still do. All the patriots out there. Yes, I use the word patriots. Oh my gosh, that might mean I'm a domestic extremist. I'm a patriot who believes in this beautiful nation and about putting our nation first, but not first in the sense that we ignore what is happening in the rest of the world, but first in the sense that whatever else happens in the rest of the world does affect us. It's a global world that we live in. I believe in making our nation great again. Yes, that stands for MAGA. Oh, well, we should. We should strive to always make our nation greater. And we are watching as our nation is divided, as we are tearing each other apart over everything from politics to what is happening in the Middle East. We're watching Democrat-run cities just wither away. Companies, businesses fleeing those states, those cities, as crime surges in those communities. My gosh. And drugs have taken over. And now we're seeing that spill over into our rural communities. What is happening? American cities appear to have fallen off the cliff in terms of safety, cleanliness, and beauty. When I was in New York City, I could see it. Just the city changing, going back. That's the thing. They have these ebbs and flows, but we're seeing an increase in drug addiction and an increase in violence on our streets that we've never seen before, and thievery and robbery. And when I was in New York City, I can't even begin to tell you how many police officers were like, if you see anyone on a motorcycle or a scooter and there are two of them sitting and they come up near you, get out of the way. They're going to take your bags. They're going to knock you to the ground. They're going to rob you. And there's not much we could do about it unless we're right there to see it. When I was in the middle of that Hamas, I think I would call it a Hamas supportive, a protest against Israel, those thousands of people that came out on the supposed day of rage to basically go after Israel after a massive attack led to the horrific deaths of 1,300 people plus, and hostages and thousands wounded. How does that happen? On today's podcast, I have on Seattle's own Jason Rantz to discuss what happened in our cities, why there has this shift has taken place, why we have left American values for the most part behind, why it is all of our responsibilities, folks, all of us, whether you're a conservative or a Democrat, to do the right thing and to speak out. Jason has reported on the radical and violent actions of Black Lives Matter and Antifa. He was on the ground and saw it for himself. So I'm going to ask him about BLM celebrating Hamas and even using that paraglider symbol as a resistance message. They are terrorists too. If you support what Hamas did, killing babies, killing women, elderly, children, raping them, sodomizing them, let's tell the truth about what happened, burning them on fire. If you support that kind of barbarism and you support what Hamas did, you are nothing more than a terrorist too. but I'll also dive into with Jason Rantz into why so many of our cities are a disaster right now and what we can do to get them back, what we can do to save our nation. Folks, but first, I want to thank Allegiance Gold. Imagine a future where your retirement is protected from the storms of market volatility. We've seen that now everywhere, right? The erosive forces of inflation, recession, government meddling, and economic uncertainties. Imagine retiring with peace of mind and the freedom to pursue your own dreams. That future, my dear friends, can become your reality, courtesy of Allegiance Gold. Right now, you can get $5,000 of free silver on a qualifying purchase when you visit protectwithsara.com today. That is protectwithsara.com today. With over 50 years of combined experience, millions of dollars in completed transactions, resulting in thousands of satisfied clients, helped us earn the most trusted gold IRA firm in the nation. I love Allegiance Gold. Diversify, diversify, diversify. Protect your assets. Protect your family. Get up to $5,000 in free silver in a qualifying purchase when you visit protectwithsara.com today, or give them a call at 877-702-SARA. That's SARA. Don't wait. Take control of your retirement today. Call 877-702-SARA, SARA, and speak with one of our experts. Yes, they'll answer all your questions and help you get started on the path to a more secure and prosperous retirement. Time is of the essence. Protect your future with Allegiance Gold. Visit protectwithsara.com. That is protectwithsara, SARA.com. I'm so grateful to have Jason Rantz on the show here on the Sarah Carter Show. He is the host of the Jason Rantz Show on KTTH Radio Seattle, such a beautiful city. I love Seattle. And you, my friend, are the author of a new book, What's Killing America? And I'm so happy to have you on the show because I don't think there is a better time than right now to talk about what's killing America. And for that matter, what's killing these values that we hold so dear, which is freedom and liberty and the principles that our nation stands on. So thank you so much for being on the show.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, anytime, Jason, anytime. I want to talk. We were talking, so everybody out there who's listening, Jason and I were talking before we came on to do this podcast about his book. And he brought up such an important point. He said, everybody that's interviewing me, it kind of always goes towards the Democrats. It's like the Democrats are all to blame. And Jason and I are like, I think we're of the same mindset on this. This is not just a Democrat problem. This is an everybody problem, right? Explain.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, so there are different issues, of course, when talking about what's killing America. And I think that a lot of folks, when I pitch the book, I'll get someone saying Democrats or Biden, and then they kind of move on. But it's not that simple for a number of reasons. Number one, there's a lot of what the radical left implements that sounds really great on paper, and it convinces some Republicans to jump on board. Certainly voters have jumped on board some of what it is that they're pitching. But most importantly, you hear from radical leftists all the time about how there's institutionalized racism, sexism, all those things. Well, they've changed the institutions. They've done that already. They said that they were going to dismantle and rebuild, and that's precisely what they've done when it comes to criminal justice, homelessness, drugs, housing policy, you name it. I mean, they're at the point where they have mandated what kind of cars we're going to drive or what kind of stoves we can cook on. That's not something that if you simply replace a Democrat with a Republican that you're going to be able to undo. There's not a flip of the switch. You have to know how to decode the language that folks on the radical left use, because otherwise you're just going to be completely in the dark. I'll give you a perfect example of this, something called harm reduction. I'm willing to bet even here in woke Seattle, I can go and ask someone to define it and they won't be able to. But it's the program or the strategy that's in place, not just in Seattle, but all across the country, that is directly responsible for the rise in overdose deaths. 2022 saw the highest number of fatal overdoses we've seen. Now, I'm in a city and a county that has already hit another historic high. Harm reduction, the way that it's pitched on paper, is that we're going to get people the help that they need, and up until they're finally ready to get them into treatment, we're going to push them there, but we're going to make it so that their behaviors are safer. So we're not going to lose them to drug addiction while we're trying to help.
Does this mean we pass out the needles? We give them a safe space to use the drugs. We cordon off an area around City Hall where they can all loiter and just do drugs together, like a utopia, as we talked about. Like this.
Exactly. I mean, that's precisely what it means. On paper, they don't say that. On paper, they don't say we're going to hand out crack pipes and needles and allow people to smoke fentanyl wherever it is they want to smoke. That's not what they tell you on paper. They tell you that it's all about treatment, but it's actually not about treatment. Harm reduction does not prioritize drug treatment. And though people think that it does, and that's how it gets passed, this is just about keeping people emboldened to continue to use. And the problem, of course, is that they basically claim on the radical left that they don't want to stigmatize anyone who's a drug user, that this has to be up to them and they have to come to their own conclusions. Meanwhile, they're causing a whole lot of problems. Many times we're talking about homeless people who are addicts, and that's actually how they became homeless to begin with. And they are ruining life for everybody else.
Yeah, it's not just about them. And I say that this is about everybody else around them. And I think so many of us have had addicts in our family or people that have either been addicted to alcohol or to narcotics or whatever that may be, even if it's gambling, if it's sex, whatever the addiction is out there that everybody's giving a medical title to. But really it's about responsibility, and it's the responsibility of us as a society. It's their responsibility to do no harm to others. I got to tell you, I was in San Diego. This was probably a few weeks ago, and I couldn't believe it. I ran across the street, just wanted to grab a taco for lunch. That's it. Just nice little place, grabbed my taco, came back over across the street, and a woman pulls out a crack pipe, like right in front of me. There's a cop right behind me. And she pulls out her crack pipe. She lights it right in my face, and she just starts smoking crack. And I'm thinking, like, I don't ever remember being younger and ever seeing that. This is a whole new thing where even police can't make arrests, and where our children are exposed to not only the most dangerous chemicals and drugs, but to very dangerous and violent people on the streets that are making it almost impossible for people to live a normal life in the city anymore, even in rural communities.
Yeah. Well, that's a problem, right? It doesn't just stay in Democrat-run cities. It spreads all across the country. You can look at Oregon, for example, where voters in Portland basically legalized drugs in the entire state. That's how many voters they have in Multnomah County. And so if you're living in more rural areas or conservative areas, like the kinds that are trying to break away from Oregon and join Idaho, they're now subject to Measure 110, which has just killed so many people. But this is harm reduction at work, and people don't recognize it. They know that there's some problem going on, but they don't know what to connect the dots to. They don't know the why is this happening right now beyond the sort of generalized, well, it's the Democrats. Sure, it's Democrats, it's radical Democrats, but that doesn't mean anything. If you don't know that it's harm reduction, you're not going to be able to get rid of that.
Absolutely. Gosh, Jason, you just put it so perfectly. It's like sometimes you're the light bulb for people. You know what I mean? Like people are like, I know it's bad. What do we do? How do we fix this? But also our lawmakers. And this is on the Republican side too. And we have to accept responsibility for this. We have to know what's actually happening in our communities. You spend a lot of time in Washington, D.C. You know how things operate. You are a learned man. You are talking to the top of the top all the time. Do you think sometimes our lawmakers, the people that are advising them, just don't even know what the hell is going on? They're just kind of like throwing reports at the lawmakers and kind of giving them briefings on things that happen to just go in one ear and out another, because we're not focused on the solutions. We're always focused on the problems and just spewing out what these problems are, and then expecting that to be a reason for someone to ring the bell and say, okay, I'm going to vote for that guy.
Precisely. You can't just point out that there are problems, because we already know that there are problems. So what are you going to do to make it better? And I think that's the difference between Republicans and Democrats in a lot of ways, where you have the Democrats proposing ideas where people just don't realize that their ideas are making the problems worse. And the Republicans aren't offering counters. They're not telling you what we can do. In certain circumstances, they certainly are. But I think when we're talking about lawmakers, particularly at the national level, they're in DC, they live in bubbles. The only real way that they have a true understanding of what's happening back at home is when they hear from constituents. And too often, constituents don't get involved at all. They're not making those phone calls or sending those emails. So their experiences at the national level, whether we're talking about senators or members of the House, they just don't have that same experience as to what it's like living in Seattle or New York or Chicago, Atlanta every single day. They know what's going on in DC. And unfortunately, some members of Congress have become victims of what's going on in DC. But beyond that, they don't have the same real world experiences that everyone who's, just going about their day, going to work, taking their kids to cross country meets. Those are the ones who actually know what's happening on the ground. But again, they don't necessarily know the why. And so that's why I wrote What's Killing America.
And I think this is so important. I want to talk a little bit about what happened in Israel, because I think it goes with your book as well. Last week, Black Lives Matter declared support for Hamas and posted a horrific graphic that has been floating around the internet with the, Hamas terrorist, like the symbol of him parachuting into Israel, which is, it was so horrific that I still can't even sleep, because I was there 2 months ago in some of those kibbutzes, and I was traveling and talking to people, and I'm reading the stories so that I absolutely face the horrors and understand as a human being what our Israeli brothers and sisters, our Jewish brothers and sisters were facing that day. I remember looking at that BLM, and it's so upsetting to me. And then thinking back when the Democrats took their knee for, when basically it was for BLM. I don't say it was for George Floyd. It was a political move. It was a stunt. It looked ridiculous. It looked stupid. They weren't even wearing the right African scarf garbs, that hung over their necks. It was like completely just gross. It was gross. There's no other word for it. It's gross. And you could tell they were pandering. It was just disgusting. Looking at what BLM did right now, this is an organization that supports Marxism. It supports terrorism. It doesn't stand for any American values. We're seeing thousands of people on the streets. Some of the pictures from Dearborn, Michigan, from New York, where I was at, I felt like I was in the Middle East. I was like, I was nervous. I was afraid of the rise in hate. How do you explain how the American communities have become so not a melting pot, not assimilated, but have become these divergent groups fighting one another? And how concerned are you for the future of this nation because of that?
Yeah, I'm very concerned. When you look at the data, it's younger folks who hold these pretty radical views. And it makes sense when you dive into what's being taught in the classroom. You have radical educators who are getting in front of your kids at an early age, and they are indoctrinating them with all of these different viewpoints, specifically on BLM, because I have a chapter in the book about education. This is official curriculum in Chicago. There is the BLM Week of Action across schools in this country, and they're happening in places where you might not expect it. It's happening in like small red towns in Iowa and Nebraska where kids are being taught to hate the police. And people get shocked when they figure this out. But understand that when you are a kid and you're getting hit over the head with this every single day, you go into college, you get that. We already know about the indoctrination that goes there. Well, then you graduate with this worldview that's very radical. They are taught to look at everything through a very specific lens. It's a woke social justice lens focused on identity, like hyper-focused, obsessed on identity. And as it relates to Israel, they see Israelis and Israel as sort of the Western culture. They're the oppressors. And everyone else in the Middle East, particularly Palestinians, and now I guess even Hamas, they see them as the oppressed. And so they can convince themselves that all the folks are doing there, they're not terrorists, they're resistance fighters, because they're fighting against the oppressor. And we would do precisely the same thing if we were oppressed. It is a warped way of thinking, but that is very popular amongst younger folks. And they're the next generation of lawyers and teachers and CEOs and politicians. And we've already seen some of those younger people go into Congress, the AOCs of the world, who are young. They have these crazy worldviews, and they're the ones who are coming up with legislation and pushing this movement forward. The only thing we can say that was positive that came out of the remote learning during COVID was parents started to hear what was being put in front of their kids, and they started to push back. And when you look at some of the communities in California, in Virginia, Maryland, you had parents getting together, stepping up, and in some cases recalling, for example, the San Francisco school board because they were too far to the left. You had parents in Virginia taking up a very prestigious school that decided we have too many Asians and not enough Black and brown people, so we're going to go away from merit and we're going to basically do a lottery system. This was affirmative action that was ending up hurting Asian families who were taking their kids' education really seriously. The good news is when you guys figure out what's happening and the why, and you can talk the language of the left, you end up winning some of these battles. And I think that it's really inspirational to see that.
I do too. Your radio show is amazing. You're in Seattle, based out of Seattle. And Seattle is known for being very much to the left. I mean, Jason, you're like an island, and with a lot of other great people in the great state of Washington. Tiffany Smiley is a good friend of mine. She came so close to winning the Senate race there. She was amazing. And I support her wholeheartedly because I think she's just a good person. It's not about Republican or Democrat. It was about who loves their people, their constituents, their state, who wants to do the best job for their community. You just brought up something that is really very vital, and it was our school systems and what is happening and how parents stood up. I had some friends in Loudoun County that did the same. But this is widespread. This is not just endemic to Seattle or Portland or, left-leaning states. It's an ideology that is seeping into our system, into the Department of Education. It is they live by this for the most part. And it terrifies me because it's changing the fabric of our country. I wanted to ask you this. I mean, can we physically gain control back of our schools? Do you think so? Or have we lost it? Or have we lost it? Because I love the public school system. I think it's a great idea. I just think that parents need a choice now. We can't just put our kids in public school and they're going to be fine.
I mean, you certainly need a choice, regardless of whether or not you can take over public schools, because that just guarantees that you'll be able to at least stay competitive and move the needle in the public schools. But I think ultimately the answer to your question is yes, but it's not going to be easy. The underlying theme of what drives a lot of the left into winning battles is that they have control of the language. They have control of the language. When you control the words that people use, you can frame arguments in ways that are very clearly biased towards what you want the end result to be. When folks at the school level, the earlier levels of elementary, middle school, and even frankly before that, when a school would send out a message to parents, say, we're really focused this month on equity. We want everyone to be treated precisely the same. Well, they're defining equity. The way they define it is not what equity actually means. What they're saying is someone who's outperforming someone else based on color of skin only. They're just looking at that data. They'll bring the white kids down or the Asian kids down rather than bring Black students up or Latino students up, Native Americans. That's how they define equity. But that is because they have control of the language. Now, you didn't sign on to that definition. You didn't sign on to the definition that now the left is using around gender. That's not what we're about, right? We actually believe in the power of language, meaning what it actually means. But when you can manipulate people, it's really easy to win those arguments. Do you think anyone 3 years ago, if a school said we're going to focus on diversity and inclusion and equity, would anyone have batted an eye on that? No, that sounds great. Who doesn't want people to feel included? Who doesn't value diversity of thought? Like, all of those things are pretty obvious to the average person, but that's not actually what they meant. And so that's what I mean when we have to decode the language that the left uses. I guarantee you there is language that I cover in this book that some people at home have never heard of.
Oh, I'm
because some of the language
I never heard of.
Yeah,
until
same thing.
You,
I study this stuff.
I mean, this is what's so important about your book is that you give a guideline. So it's not just you talking to people. It's not just you telling someone something. It's giving them tools in a book that allow the parent or the person or the brother, the sister, the mother, the father, the grandparent to be like, you know what? I can't believe I didn't have this earlier. It's like a decoder of like what is happening in our community. It's like a, what do you call it? Like a map, a road map to seeing what is happening. I think that's why it is so important that everybody get this book, Human Super Beats. I talk about this because I absolutely love this. And all this energy you're hearing in my voice right now came because I took 2 of my Human Super Beats before I came on the podcast. I love the taste, and I love the way they make me feel. And I love the fact that it supports my heart, my health. I told you before, my mother, she had heart disease. She did not know it. She passed away with a heart attack. And it was devastating for our family. And I love her and miss her every single day of my life. And I want to be there for my children. So folks, we all have a heartfelt reason to support our blood pressure. In fact, more than half of the US population would benefit from blood pressure support. Paired with a healthy lifestyle, the antioxidants in Super Beets are clinically shown to be nearly 2 times more effective at promoting normal blood pressure than a healthy lifestyle alone. Isn't that awesome? With my busy schedule, and you know me, I'm traveling everywhere for Sean Hannity. I could be in Chicago one day, New York the next, Denver the next. I mean, I'm traveling time zones, weather zones, all kinds of zones. I've been overseas, recently got back from Israel, but guess what I had with me in my bag? My Super Beets, because I want to do something healthy for my heart. Supporting healthy blood pressure comes with a bonus. Super Beets Heart Chews support healthy circulation. So you not only get blood pressure support, you also get productive, heart healthy energy without the crash. Double your potential with Super Beets Heart Chews. Get a free 30-day supply of Super Beets Heart Chews and 15% off your first order by going to getsuperbeets.com and using promo code Sara, S-A-R-A. That's getsuperbeets, BEETS.com, code Sara, S-A-R-A. If you're enjoying today's interview, hit that subscribe button down below and subscribe on your favorite podcast app. Thank you. I have some more questions because I love talking to you about this stuff. One of the major parts of your book is your journalism inside the chop zone. You did such amazing work in that in Seattle. That the leftists in the city allowed basically to continue as this autonomous zone for weeks, even though people lost their lives in there. What were their thoughts on violence while you were there? I mean, because you talked about, the use of language. Well, it's crazy. They commit violence and yet they say they're oppressed. It's like,
yeah. Well, they use the term insurrection when we actually had one in Seattle. They were armed when they took over the 6 city blocks. This happened at a very odd time. They were taking advantage of the BLM movement post George Floyd, and you had a lot of progressives who are white, who are in positions of power, who didn't want to be perceived as slighting a movement that they presumed was being pushed by Black community members. And while there certainly were Black community members a part of the movement, it was mostly being pushed by white people. Seattle overall, just as a demographic, I think it's like 7.6% Black. Almost everyone else is a mix of either Asian or white. So it was mostly privileged white kids who were doing what they were doing. And no one wanted to say anything because they recognize that the folks who are doing it, they're very active. They're the base of the progressive movement. And if you want to stay in power, you're going to have to placate them. For me, what was just blowing my mind, and I still remember this, I was covering this obviously for Fox News in addition to my radio show. And every single time after I would do an appearance, I would get tweets from folks or emails from folks on the left telling me I was making it all up, that I'm exaggerating, that there's stop using hyperbole, everything is fine. And I'm like, dude, I don't know CGI. I filmed this, I posted it. I didn't make it up. It's clearly happening. But then you had, making matters worse, you had left-wing outlets like CNN, for example, who come out here and they're there for an hour in the middle of the day on a Tuesday when it feels like that sort of atmosphere of a carnival or a street fair. And then they're in their hotels at night when people are getting murdered or there's an attempted rape or an arson or all the vandalism. And as much as we were trying to do our best in covering what was actually going on, it was just like 1 or 2 outlets. Locally, no one was really talking about it in an accurate way, with the exception, of course, of a handful of journalists, one of whom is a friend of mine who was assaulted while she was doing an appearance for one of the local networks. I mean, she had to run and take refuge at a Seattle Fire Department precinct. That's how bad it was. And yet we're being told all is well because you don't want to tick off some activists because you want to stay in power. What folks allowed to happen, all because they thought it would help them politically, including the violence, including the harassment of public officials going to their homes and threatening them. It was just too much, but they allowed it to go. And that kind of stuff begets the same kind of activism. So all that ends up happening is you see an increase in it. And we saw so much violence over the course of several months, not even just in Seattle. Portland was a total nightmare. There were portions in San Francisco doing the same thing, New York. It was really bad. But we taught these younger activists who are radicals that, yeah, you can act out in this way and you'll win some battles, because they were very successful.
Well, yeah. And it was almost like approved of. It was like given a stamp of approval, even to the point where before she was vice president, Kamala Harris was asking people to raise money to get bail for some of these activists that had literally destroyed their own communities. Some of them came from other communities, but they came in and destroyed communities, destroyed livelihoods, lives were taken. And I think this is what's really every single person, I know you got to be hearing the same. We're both Fox News contributors. People probably walk up to you and you're on Fox all the time. And I am too. And they say, you know, I can't believe what's happening to our country. But what's so strange is that the FBI treats publicly, we've heard about domestic extremists, it being the Catholic Latin mass goer, which I keep saying over and over again. I'm Catholic. You know, I go to Catholic church. The Latin mass goer is like 80 years old. I don't know how they're going to be like, I don't even know what they're saying when I walk in there. I'm like, that's like, so like, you got to be really dedicated to do that one. And so they're usually the elderly. And there's some that are young, but it's like they've basically made the conservative or the patriot, so-called patriot or MAGA person, a domestic extremist, but they didn't do that with these groups, not in the same way at all. And I just saw some video that was posted and I retweeted it and it's gotten a lot of attention. It was a Citizen Free Press posting of all of the people right now by the White House that were like kicking at the Secret Service, pushing them. Tommy Lahren, she was funny. She's like, why is it that they all dress the same, Sarah? Why is it that they all look the same? I'm like, because they're Marxists. And they weren't being arrested. They weren't being hauled off to jail for an insurrection. They were kicking at the Secret Service, trying to get into the White House. So how do you reconcile that with our federal law enforcement, with our political, the way things are politically right now divided in our country? How do we address that to the American people that are just kind of confused as to, can I stand up for my rights or will I be hauled off to jail? Am I not on the right side of the party or the right side of the fence?
I can't say that I wouldn't share that exact concern, the way things are going, but I do think that there are power in numbers. It sucks being that one person who stands up during a meeting. Let's go back to the schools for a moment, just standing up and saying, okay, I don't think that this is right. Giving a speech in front of a school board and then, 100 people behind you. Well, what a lot of those parents realized was the second that they were brave enough to take that stance, someone else then took the same stance, and then someone else and someone else and someone else. When you realize that we might be silent, but we're in the majority, you can inspire other folks to step up and do something and create some kind of change. I think what's happening right now, particularly in the example you just gave, it's just a continuation of left-wing violence that is seen as politically advantageous. And so they don't actually want to make any arrests because they think that they're going to win some battles around it. It's incredibly dangerous what they're doing. I wish they would treat all domestic political violence precisely the same.
Exactly.
Because I think it is wrong to do that. I think most people recognize that. But keep in mind that most people aren't getting access to the video you just talked about. It might do well on Twitter or X, but the average person probably will never see that clip because CNN's not going to cover it. The New York Times is not going to talk about it. Local television reports never take a deep dive into these issues.
How did this happen, Jason? How did this happen where news agencies that I used to look up to, I probably shouldn't have, because now that I look at their history, the New York Times failed miserably during the Holocaust, and they failed miserably during that time. But overall, I think there were great journalists doing incredible work at the Post, at the New York Times, at the main, the Seattle, the one in Seattle. Post Intelligencer, yes. And there were incredible stories and truth telling and fact checking on the government. How did it come to the point where the New York Times, the Post, and these papers became the mouthpiece for the government? They literally are like, the CIA said it, so it must be true.
Yeah, I mean, you and I got into this because we want to question things, even things we agree with generally. We still want to make sure that it's true. When I agree with something, that's especially when I want to double check to make sure something's true, because that's a bias of mine. I think it all accelerated during the Trump years. Trump broke a lot of these people. They were always left wing to begin with, or majority left wing for the last several years, and you clearly saw that trend. I think overall, the audience has changed in what they are expecting. They do want a little bit more of opinion and analysis in what they perceive to be news reporting. I used to be very clear about this. I'm not a reporter. I have an opinion. I provide analysis. I think reporters are supposed to just give you the facts and allow you to make up your own mind.
Absolutely.
But when they realize that they could have more power and influence over people and really over the culture and over these political issues, that kind of power will change people. And if you're already pretty far to either side, frankly, and you get a taste of that power, I think it's just a little bit too much for folks. The problem from a perspective of the consumer of news, they don't seek out very many sources. They go to their go-tos. They have one, maybe they have two. And sure, you self-curate on Twitter or Facebook, so you're getting some things on your feeds. But for the most part, you don't have time to do a lot of the research to get the dots connected. The local media is, in particular, really, really awful when you come from a place that is majority Democrat. And frankly, this would be true for majority Republican cities as well. But when you're a local reporter, you have to be able to justify to your boss, why did you not get that interview with the governor? Why did you not get that interview with the mayor? Why aren't you getting called on at press conferences? And when you're a politician in these deeply blue areas, you could just say, yeah, you were mean to me. I don't like how you framed a story, so I'm just not going to use you anymore. I'm going to ice you out. That's a really difficult thing for a local TV reporter in particular to get over. And so they are incentivized to basically toe the party line and do what the party in power says. You mix in on top of that, they're already kind of liberal to begin with, especially in cities like Seattle or New York, Portland, San Francisco. So it just creates this mess where people just aren't getting dots connected for them. And that was actually the main reason why I wrote What's Killing America, is I needed to connect dots for other folks.
I got to tell you, everybody, please, please, please order this book. You will thank me for it. You will write me for it. You will write Jason. You'll become a huge fan. I am a huge fan of Jason Rantz. And I'm telling you, he is going to open up your eyes like he opened mine to what is killing America and what we can do, which is, I think, the greatest part of the book, to save our nation. Jason, where can we get the book? Where can all of our listeners find you and follow all your great work?
Yeah, so you can get the book wherever it is you get your book. So Amazon.com, Walmart.com, Books A Million, Barnes & Noble. If you're going to a brick and mortar, just make sure you call them ahead of time. They don't really like to stock up on the conservative books, which I found this out very quickly, that it's as a conservative author, it is almost impossible outside of conservative media to get any kind of help. And so other than Fox News and, of course, radio and podcasts, MSNBC is not calling to do a debate. New York Times isn't going to cover the book. So I actually need conservatives to go out and actually purchase for liberal friends. Give them a copy of the book and actually have these conversations.
For Hanukkah, for Christmas, get the book, celebrate, give it to them and let them. I agree with you. I want to listen to all sides. I laugh my head off whenever I listen to Rachel Maddow. I think she's comedy relief hour, but I still listen. I still
Yeah,
want
it's
to hear what
important.
they're saying on the left, and believe it or not, I turn on CNN too sometimes, and they've actually done some pretty good coverage of Israel. I'm going to give them that, and I think that's important to notice when people are actually doing the right thing too. Jason, thank you so much. You're so wonderful. I can't wait to have you back on the show. Remember, folks, get out there, get this book. He is the author of What's Killing America. That's Jason Rantz. If you don't know who he is, you will now. He is giving you basically the map and exposing what is happening inside our country and giving you the tools to fight back and save our nation. It was phenomenal having Jason on the show. I think he's great. I love being on Sean Hannity with him whenever we're on the show together. Okay, I want to do a little explanation about why I have no makeup on and my baseball hat on with my ponytail. I just got in from New York late last night. I had a meeting early this morning, and my daughter, Annalise, had her final cross country track meet. So I did not want to miss that at all. It was in between that meeting and coming to do my podcast. So I didn't care. I went without my makeup. I threw on my baseball hat. I made my way down to the track, and guess what? Annalise did amazing. She did her 2-mile run. She ran the full 2 miles. Her first mile, she did it in 9 minutes, which is amazing for her. She finished in 7th, which is astonishing because she was up against 8th graders and 7th graders, and she's 11. And when she first started cross country, she was like, "Mom, I can't even run 100 feet because it's just too much this early in the morning." But she stuck with it. She never gave up. She never gave in. She got up every morning at 5 a.m. By 6 a.m., she was running on the track. And by 7:30 to 8 a.m., she was getting ready to head to class. So I want to thank Annalise for being so amazing and inspiring me to get out there and start running again. I love you, love you, love you, Annalise. And I love all of you too out there. Be inspired. Do something fun. Go without makeup for the day and don't even care. Whatever it is you want to do. This is America while we still have it. Please make sure you're subscribed to the Sara Carter Show here on your favorite podcast app or wherever you get your podcasts. It really helps. I love those downloads. We're seeing so many more of them. Let's get it. Let's keep it going, right? Because I'm really excited. I love this show. This is one of my favorite parts of my day. Follow me on Truth at Sara Carter Official, on X at Sara Carter DC, and on Instagram at SCarterDC. God bless you. God bless our great nation. Please pray for peace in the Middle East and for the great state of Israel, and pray for our major American cities. We all need them. And by the way, while you're at it, just pray for everyone. We all need a good prayer every now and then.